Hello YouTubers, welcome to this video tutorial, Vegetative Propagation Part 2nd. It's in continuation to the Part 1 wherein we have seen the propagation through stem cuttings, types of stem cuttings, and the treatment of stem cuttings. In Part 2, we will see the rooting medium and different types of the rooting frames and how to plant the cuttings in rooting medium and the care which is to be taken during rooting, hardening and transplanting of the newly rooted stem cuttings and some other techniques related to it. So first of all, we'll focus on the rooting medium, which is good for the stem cuttings. Variety of media are available to plant stem cuttings, and the type of the medium greatly influences the percentage of rooting and also the rooting system in a cutting. Suppose you require a sandy loam soil is preferred for the hardwood stem cuttings. As you know, the sandy loam soil is porous in nature. It's with good aeration. It also holds water and nutrient capacity. So it has a good water and nutrient retention capacity. Plus, rooting medium should be aseptic in nature. Usually all commercially prepared media are clean and sterile. And also they should have a low fertilizers, because excessive fertility damage or inhibit development of new roots. And artificial medium contains slow release fertilizers because they are made such that they release their fertilizers slowly, because excessive fertility will damage the development of the roots. And medium should be uniformly moist. Why? Because if you put the cuttings in an incompletely moist medium, what will happen there? There will be an evident wilting in stem cuttings, because when you are putting a stem cutting in a medium, it has a cut surface. If it comes in contact with the dry packet of the medium, every chances are that the moisture will be lost from the stem cutting to the soil medium. As a result, the stem cutting will show an evident wilting. So you prefer a moist medium which is uniformly moist. And also for rooting, there should be a temperature within the ambient as well as in the medium, and which should be in the range of 20 to 25 degrees Celsius. Before you insert the cuttings in the medium is usually fumigated. Whether it is soil or soilless mixes, they are usually fumigated. DD13-dichloropropane plus 1,2-dichloropropane, it is fumigated with it because it eliminates the nematodes and other pathogenic organisms. Or you can subject the medium to solarization that eliminates the unwanted weeds as well as eliminates the nematodes and other pathogenic organisms. Easy to root cuttings are usually planted in small containers which are filled with a mixture of coarse sand and soil in the ratio of 2:1. And if you are using a potting mixture, it should be either heat treated or fumigated. As I said, heat treated means the solarization, or it should be fumigated with these chemicals. There are soilless mixtures also available. The ingredients of the soilless mixtures include 1 part of coconut coir, 1 part perlite or a sterile sand, peat moss or vermiculite, and they are combined and thoroughly mixed together with small amount of water. We have already discussed in detail the nature of these soilless mixtures, but just to refresh your memory, we will we'll give some brief idea about the peat moss as well as the vermiculite. We have already discussed it in our previous videos. Peat moss is basically a partially decomposed organic matter formed from the sphagnum mosses. It's growing on the surface of the soil or rocks. It's good for plants that need acidic soils, excellent water holding capacity. It's disease resistant and mixes well in potting soil. Vermiculite is a natural mineral which is a hydrated laminar magnesium aluminum iron silicate. Shiny flakes are usually golden brown to blackish in color, has a neutral pH. It improves soil structure and aeration, improves soil water retention and nutrients. And also, we have other these soilless mixes like as perlite. It's a mined volcanic rock product made from volcanic glass superheated, composed of 70 to 75% silicon dioxide. It's used as a soil supplement. It improves soil structure, provides excellent drainage, good aeration, and for seed germination, we use usually 1/2 perlite and 1/2 coco peat, but for cuttings, we can use the 100% perlite also. There is also coco peat. Coco peat is basically a natural biodegradable fibrous material, which is a byproduct of coconut husk, and it mixes with soil, improves soil texture, makes sandy soil more compact and clay soil more aerated, improves soil aggregation, increases water retention capacity, increases microbiological activities, and leads to better nitrogen fixation and nitrification. That means all these mixes have a good quality, they have their pH, they help in soil aggregation, they are good for they have a good aeration and mineral and water retention capacity. This is the coconut peat. This is when it is wet with water. Is a peat moss which is taken from the sphagnum moss. This is perlite, and these are the vermiculite, different grades of the vermiculite. And you know why it's called as vermiculite? I have already mentioned, because vermiculite, when it is heated, it appears like a worm. It spreads like a worm. That's why it's called the vermiculite. These are different mixes which are named as the potting soil and which are also named as the soilless mixes. Now, after knowing about these mixtures, you require rooting frames. As you know, the rooting frame, it can be a wooden structure, and they are fabricated by the nurseryman. They are used to develop adventitious roots in stem cuttings. They can be square or rectangular in shape, and they are available in various sizes. There can be frames or benches which are of various variable width and length. Standard height or the depth should be 5 to 6 inches. This is how a rooting frame can look like. Wooden rooting frames which can be fabricated by the nurseryman, and they have an end board which is 12 inches long and 4 inches should be its height. Bottom board should be 13.5 inches length, because it should be there should be some extra, at least 12 only, there should be 13.5 inches. Side board is 16 inches, and these are the frames with the bottom gaps. It maintains the bottom gaps for development of the roots. The dimensions of the rooting frames should be such that half the length of cutting is inserted in the medium, because you have to fill up this space with the medium, and there should be around about 50% of it in the medium, leaving 1 to 2 inches of the cutting above the bottom of the frame. So these are the wooden frames which are usually made by the nurseryman. And thumb rule for the wooden frame is that deep enough to accommodate 4 inches of rooting medium. So that means the height of the column should be at least 4 inches. Wooden frames wind frame dimensions can be 16 into 12 into 4 inches. And you know, at the bottom there is a gap which is maintained between 3 bottom boards. Bottom is lined with few layers of newspaper or other material to hold the sand and the other rooting medium. Because the gap is there, the gap is to be filled up with the biodegradable material that can be the newspapers also, to hold the sand and the rooting medium. Alternative to wooden frames, there are plastic trays. They are also preferred, and trays having holes in the bottom for drainage. They are fixed with sometimes they are fixed with aerial iron or steel wire frame. And because you can put a polythene over them to reduce the water losses from the cutting. For reduction, you place the stretched polythene sheets over the wire frame. And because of this polythene, it can also maintain the high humidity around the plant material. It is a conservative measure. So these can be the trays which have certain holes and where you can see the cuttings are being planted. This is the rooting medium where the cuttings are being planted for development of the adventitious roots. This is how you can make a rooting frame, this is the rooting frame. The height of it should be 4 inches, then it is filled with the soil, and then there are present the wire frame. The wire frame and the polythene sheet is being placed over it, and just to keep the interior of this humid, there is to maintain the humidity around the stem cuttings. That's why you put polythene sheets over it. Then how you will insert the cuttings in the medium? Whether you are putting it in the field or in a frame, a wooden frame, you have to insert the cuttings. You have treated the cuttings now. You have treated the cuttings with the hormones, either with liquid formulations or with talc formulations. Those treated cuttings are manually inserted in proper holes and which are made in the rooting medium. The holes can be made in rows with the help of a finger, or you can take a small stick, or there is a small instrument which is called as the dibbler, and which is being put in the soil to make a hole which is enough to accommodate the cutting without brushing of the rooting inducing substances. So you make a hole, the hole should be enough to accommodate the cutting, and there should not be the brushing of the rooting. If you are putting the talc to the cutting, it should not be brushed off from the rooting, from the cutting. So you are putting the cuttings very near interspace. It should be 1 to 2 inches in between the adjacent holes. Why you are putting them very closer? To ensure good circulation of air around the cuttings. To prevent overcrowding, you are keeping 1 to 2 inches, and also to allow the good incidence of the light to the medium. So you are maintaining an interspace of 1 to 2 inches between the two cuttings or between the two holes where you are planting the cuttings for rooting purposes. And that is, the purpose is that there should be a good circulation of air around the cutting, and no overcrowding should be there, and also there should be the good incidence of light to the medium. This is how you can take the rooting frame, and you are slightly moistening the soil, and then you are leveling it, leveling and firming the soil. It's filled up with the soil, and you are leveling and firming the soil, and you are slightly making it moist, and then you are making with the dibbler or with the stick, you are making a holes in rows. These holes are sufficient enough to accommodate. So you are planting a cutting per hole, and you are firming the soil around with the dibbler. So first you have made the hole, and you are putting the cutting, and then you are consolidating the soil around the cutting, and then with a sprayer you are watering it, and the cuttings with watering cane. And this is how you are planting the stem cuttings and preparing the medium for planting the stem cuttings for the rooting. So these are some of the wooden frames which were made for the purpose of some research at ZTR watershed, and the different types of stem cuttings have been planted there. They have been treated with the hormones, and there are the labels made, what is the concentration of the hormone, and then there is always one control there which is not treated. So in each tray you will find there is a one layer of the one row of the cuttings is control, and the others are treated with the different types of the rooting hormones, and to assess the rootings within these cuttings. And you are inserting about 1/3 of the cutting into the soil. You maintain the vertical orientation of the stem. You maintain the polarity of the stem cutting, because there is always the upper cut and the lower cut. Do not insert the cutting upside down. Maintain good space between the cuttings, as allow all leaves to receive the sunlight. So it's very important you make 1 to 2 inches space between the two cuttings. Soon after insertion of cutting, medium should be watered. Watering serves two purposes. First, it compacts the medium around the cuttings. Secondly, it provides the initial watering essential to maintain turgidity in stem cuttings. So this is already shown in the previous slide. And rooting frames planted with the stem cuttings are placed inside the polyhouse, or there are already made these rooting boxes, frames, which have the wire frames, and you are covering it with the polyethylene sheets. Polyethylene cover is held firmly with the ground. If it is a sheet here, it is placed in ground, and you are mounted with the soil so that it maintains the humidity within the medium. Now, what is the care you have to take for the cuttings during the rooting? For root development in stem cuttings, you maintain the high humidity around the stem cutting. Keep a check on moisture level, both in soil medium and stem cuttings. And you are covering the cuttings with a plastic bag, having a small hole at the top to prevent the cutting from drying. Place the covered container under indirect light, not indirect light. And you prefer the eastern side, because west side is too warm and south window is too bright. North is too dim, so you prefer the eastern side. To avoid drying, maintain turgidity. Softwood cuttings should be kept under proper mist, because they can lose their moisture. To maintain their turgidity, they are usually kept under proper mist. So mist treatment is given to the cuttings. Mist beds are available with automatic mist spray system, and mist should be done only during the day. Nighttime misting encourages rotting, because during day when you are supplying with the mist, because of the temperatures, the most of the water is lost. But if you are doing it during the night, it will remain there. It will encourage the rotting in the propagating material. So misting inhibits transpiration and helps plant to conserve water while it forms new roots. So mist treatment is also given to the cuttings to prevent them from drying. This is how you are applying the mist, which can be given through the foggers over these rooting frames. You are spraying a water mist over softwood stem cuttings planted in rooting frames. Then you have to see, in absence of a proper mist system, plant cuttings directly in a small propagation tray. Tray should have a moist medium. Tray usually is covered with thin perforated polyethylene sheet, firmly held with ground, allows good air circulation, maintain high relative humidity, and prevent water loss by the plant and the medium. So you have a choice here. Either you take it where the mist is being provided, or you can use the perforated polyethylene sheets. Or you have a choice, you can have a high-tech automatic greenhouse where humidity around the propagating material is maintained by foggers or by humidifiers. Foggers produce a large volume of fog droplets in 20 to 30 micron range. So you see high-tech greenhouse, suppose this is the greenhouse here, it's fully automatic and controlled, and these are the foggers here. This is basically a comb, and then it is connected with the system. Whenever there is an overall increase in the temperature or there is less humidity, the humidifier which is here, sensor of the humidifier senses it, and automatically the system starts and the fogger starts spraying the mist over the material. And then there is if temperature is high, that time the comb will start putting the water, and then there will be a circulation of the this air which will decrease the temperature within the greenhouse. So you have a choice. You can use a high-tech greenhouses also. After care of propagating material now, there should be weekly checks of the cutting, because you are putting them to assess whether the rooting has taken place there. There can be a fungal infection also under humid conditions. So you have to check it. Infected cuttings should be removed and disposed of, because they will finish the whole propagating material. The aftercare is very important. To protect the remaining material, cuttings can be sprayed. You can spray Kaptan 50% at the rate of 2 teaspoons in 1 gallon of water. That means whenever you have a humid condition, that time you should prefer these sprays, so that the damage is not done to the propagating material. Now you have to see whether the rooting has taken place or there, because you are planting a stem cutting for rooting. So what are the tests for the rooting? After several weeks, the cuttings are checked for initiation and development of roots. At periodic intervals, cutting is grasped with thumb and forefinger. This is a very traditional method. You just grasp it with the thumb and forefinger, and you put a gentle upward pull. You will feel if cutting have a rooted or not, because if heavy resistance is shown by this when you are pulling it up, it indicates the extensive root system. But if a slight resistance, that means small roots have developed. If no resistance at all, that means absence of roots are there. This is to check, because you cannot check each and every one. You check out of lot some of the cuttings to see whether they show the resistance, they show the slight resistance, or they show no resistance to the upward pull. That will indicate whether rooting has taken place or not. And there are also tests for rooting. Cuttings grown in wooden flats show root emergence through bottom. That's why you are keeping the bottom there. They will show their root emergence through bottom gap into the soil. The rooting frames made by the nurseryman have the gaps, and the rooting will come out of it, and flats having 3 to 4 inches of air space. Whenever between the soil and inside the bottom. See, each pot has an anatomy. 3 to 4 inches of air space is maintained between the pot and between the bottom, between the soil. Roots, once they will emerge, upon emergence, they lose their tips near air interspace. So when the roots are coming, being geotropic, they will move towards the gravity, but they will come into this air interspace and they will lose their tips. In absence of the root tips, plant usually produce lateral roots, because when the root tip is damaged, they will produce the lateral roots. So there will be a dense root system that will be formed there. It will be viewed from the bottom of the flat. So you can easily see that the roots have developed there. The practice of making dense root system is called as air pruning. Now it is also practiced because whenever the root is coming in contact with the air, it will lose its root tip. It will produce the lateral roots, and there will be a mesh root system, and that is called as the air pruning. It's developed on commercial lines by nursery growers. Root pruning on tree seedling is essential, initially done manually in nursery plants, because Initially it was done, they used to cut the tape root, and so that little roots are formed there. So once the rooted plant is there, you have made a stem cutting into a rooted plant. Stem cuttings with well-developed adventitious root system are to be carefully lifted from the rooting medium, and they are to be transplanted into larger pots now. Rooted stem cuttings are transferred to large size pots and allowed to grow to become new plants. Transplanting can be stressful for the plant. To avoid any damage to young rooted plant, always handle roots and cuttings, roots, and handle these rooted cuttings with care. And you use them either directly in the soil or they are planted, that's called as the potting. Potting, you use wide pots, either earthen or plastic. Nowadays, plastic is available, and when you are taking a pot, you spread the roots freely in the pot. The size of the pot depends greatly upon age and the maturity of the plant. So what size you will select, that will depend on the age and the maturity of the plant. And provide proper drainage to it. For that purpose, you are placing a piece of broken pot or a crock over the hole. Each pot will have a small hole. If it is not there, there is a sign for a hole, and make a hole in that with a nail or with any thing available, so that hole is visible there, and you put a broken pot or a small piece of a crock over the hole, so that there is a proper drainage, and cover it with a fibrous matter like coconut fiber. Whenever you are putting the broken pot over the hole, and then you should put a fibrous material at the bottom of it. Here you can see this is a pot. This is the anatomy of a pot. You are making a hole here, and you are placing some these pieces of flower pots over this, and then you are this is covered with the broken pieces of flower pots. That is, hole should be maintained there, hole should be there, and then you are covering the hole with these broken pieces of flower pots, and then this area is with the coconut fiber, so that maintain the good drainage there, and then you put some layer of the gravel there, and this is your pot mixture, which can be 2 pot soil, 1 pot sand, 1 pot peat or composite. And this area is kept, and the area is kept as a space at a top for watering. And then you are taking a plant, putting it, the roots should be spread here. So remember, you should maintain the good hole, good drainage should be maintained, otherwise you will lose the material. And then as per the instructions, you maintain this column of the pot, and then plant the rooted cutting, and then you are covering it with the potting soil, and then it looks like this, and you are keeping some space here, that is the space at the top for watering. So this is how a potting pot is used, and the material in the pot is added, and then the plant the plant with the rooting with fully developed root system is planted to it. Pots are filled with suitable potting mixtures. They should neither be too wet nor too dry. The pot should be half filled, and plus place rooted cuttings in the center. The pot should be filled with a fine soil. Roots should fall downward and remain in natural condition. In case of woody species, old roots are pruned, and only small roots, we are call them the feeding roots, are allowed to remain. This is how you place the rooted plant in a potting. Now there should be necessary acclimatization to avoid transplant shock. You should avoid direct transplantation of newly rooted cuttings in the field. They are to be slowly acclimatized to more stressful environment. First, plant them into containers or grow polybags or into beds. Before transplanting, grow them to larger size. Finally, shift to a permanent location. Cover the potted plants with polyethylene sheet, uncovering them on cloudy and humid days, regularly uncovering the cuttings at night and covering them with polyethylene sheets during the heat of the day. Repeat the same for a period of 5 or 6 days. If you will not do these things, acclimatization steps, you will lose the whole crop. I have once committed a blunder. I have lost the coronation plants of huge volume of coronation plants, and the coronation plants were basically imported from the Holland. So these are the very important steps. The acclimatization is very important. And then there are alternative methods. Is you can to pot the cuttings immediately after rooting, hold them for a time under cool, humid, shaded locations. So there are alternative methods where you can pot the cuttings. You can put them in fog chambers, which are shaded locations. There can be closed frames, there can be greenhouses, there can be shade houses, where this acclimatization process is done automatically. And then there is a hardening off. Now, before planting young plants grown in greenhouse need a period to adjust and acclimatize to outdoor conditions. This transition period is called as hardening off or weaning process. Mowing plants or rooted cuttings outdoors for a portion of a day. Gradually introduce them to the direct sunlight. So you are hardening them. Dry air and cold nights. Rooted cuttings become accustomed to strong sunlight, cool nights, and less frequent watering. A period of 7 to 10 days. So that's called as the hardening off period. Or you can put them in small shade net houses or poly houses. So hardening off is very important, which acclimatize them with the stressful conditions. This is how you can put them in these poly houses so that the hardening of the nursery plants is being done. Advantages of hardening off are basically it gradually exposes the tender plants to wind, sun, rain, toughens plant by thickening the cuticle on the leaves. Leaves lose less water. Initially propagating material should be exposed to sun on a mild day under sheltered locations for 2 to 3 hours. Exposure to sunlight is increased by few additional hours at a time. Frequency of watering is gradually reduced. So, during very cold nights, plants should be taken indoor or covered with polyethylene, or to make the rooted cuttings accustomed to cold, nurserymen gradually increase the cold exposure to the plants. After plants are well hardened off, rarely they are affected by the light, by frosts, so they can be easily transplanted to the garden. Hardening off helps to coop up transplantation shock. If you will not do these measures, there are every chances that the plant will undergo the transplantation shock and will not survive. Some propagators use root stem cuttings directly in small containers set up in flats, and rooted plants may be easily moved for transplanting. Hardening of time depends on the type of plants. Hardened of plants be given weak solution of fertilizers and ample watering after transplanting. These are some of the measures which are to be taken. There is one more process which is called as the healing in. Healing in refers to placing dug out, bare rooted, deciduous nursery plants, and they are placed close together in trenches with roots sufficiently covered with damp wood shavings. Nurserymen follow practice of heal in plants as a measure to protect the nursery stock during temporary storage. So heel in is a process where you are taking out the plant and putting them in a trench, covering it with a damp wood shavings or a material, and so that the roots will be sufficiently within the trench and they can grow in these temporary during this temporary stage. Healing in is plants are placed together in a deep or wide trenches. Canopy is positioned just above the trench and roots within the trench. Trench is filled with soil, mixed with damp sawdust, hay or leaves to cover the roots. Healing in period can vary between 1 to several months. Some growers transplant their rooted cuttings 2 or 3 times just to develop better root system. The plants transplanted several times will have a good survival rate. So that's why you do the healing in. So it can be done 2 times, 3 times, and multiple times, so that the aim is to develop a good root system and their survival rate will be more. Trees are categorized into 3 grades as per their frequency of transplantation. They are graded as 1 0, that is 1 year old, transplanted 0 times. That means it has not been transplanted. Second to 1, that is a 2 year plant, transplanted once. It is better than 1 0. 3 to a 3 year old plant, transplanted twice. That is, has been taken once and then planted again. 3-2 has enormous root system and its survival rate will be highest of the 3 grades. This is how you are doing these healing in, and you are making them to become robust and have an enormous root system. That's why you can understand it's written there. It can be 1 0 2 1 3 2. It depicts upon how many times it has been transplanted and what is the age of the plant, how many years it has been in the nursery. So this was about the healing. I think in this video we have covered the rooting medium, we have covered the rooting frames, we have covered what care is to be taken during the rooting, how the rooted cuttings are to be transplanted, and how they are to be acclimatized, and what can be the healing in processes and the hardening off, which is to be done for the survival of the stem cuttings, which have developed the adventitious roots and which are forming the which are becoming the plants now. And this covers the vegetative propagation second, especially about the stem cuttings. Hope this video has helped you to understand the techniques involved in planting the stem cuttings. In the next video, we will cover, that will be the continuation, that will include the propagation part third, which will cover the propagation through leaf cuttings. Hope you have understood it. In case you have understood, you can subscribe the channel, that is the Green Treasure. And till the next video is uploaded, goodbye, be safe. Thank you for watching this video. What we have seen so far, we have seen in this video the vegetative propagation, various aspects, that what are the types of the stem cuttings on the basis of their nature, and then how they will be collected, how they will be treated with different hormones, whether in talic form or in certain liquid formulations, and also how they will be treated like wounding, etiolation, girdling techniques. We have seen in this part 1 up to the treatment and handling of the cuttings. Hope this video will help you to understand the things and in the next coming video, that will be the part 2. It will be a series of the propagation that will cover the rooting medium, that will cover the other aspects of the propagation, and will cover the stem leaf cuttings, root cuttings, and the other aspects of vegetative propagation. Hope you have understood, and this video will help you to understand the propagation techniques. In case you have liked this video, please subscribe the channel. Till the next video, goodbye, be happy. Thank you very much.